Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite ways to trigger strikes during the warm water period. This often goes completely overlooked, and a lot of times people think they may be doing this, but they're not doing it to the point that they should be. So that's what we're going to get in today. This is one of my best summertime tips, and it works for almost every technique. It doesn't matter if you're throwing a crankbait or a soft plastic. This is a really good way to generate strikes during the warm water period. Before I share this with you though, I do want to remind you, if you watch my videos on a regular basis, please subscribe to the channel. It's a great way to show your support and your appreciation for the videos. At the same time, if you're looking to purchase some tackle and you want to support the channel, please use my Tackle Warehouse affiliate link, which I will put in the video description as well. All right, so this goes back several years at this point to when I truly saw how valuable of a tip this was. I was fishing a clear water body, a clear body of water, gin clear actually, to the point you could probably see down 15, 16 feet. And I was fishing for smallmouth bass. Now, in this case, I was making long casts with a jerk bait, and I was fishing it without really getting much action. I would get a fish come look at it at times, but I was not catching that much. And I know a lot of you were saying, well, you're throwing a jerk bait in a warm water period, which at the time was probably pretty unheard of. But I truly feel like you can catch a lot of fish on a jerk bait year round, and we're finding that more and more if you're in a forward facing sonar user. The point here is I wasn't catching that much fishing a jerk bait in a traditional manner. Now, what triggered the bite that day was when I'd make a cast, I'd work it halfway back to the boat, and the first time I got bit, I just started burning that bait back to the boat so I could make another cast. Now, when I burned it back to the boat, I got bit. And I did that like 2 or 3 times that day. I would go to make another cast, I'd burn it back to the boat, and either I'd catch a fish or I'd have one come flying out of nowhere and basically come at the bait as soon as I was picking the bait out of the water. So what that did is it told me maybe I need to be fishing this bait fast. So what I ended up doing the rest of that day was casting the jerk bait as far as I could, burning it halfway back to the boat, stopping it, burning it all the way back to the boat. And it was like every time I did that, not every cast, but I probably caught another 10 or 15 fish that day. And all they wanted was an extremely fast retrieve. They wanted to feel like that bait fish, which was my jerk bait, was getting away from them. And smallmouth hate that, largemouth hate that, spotted bass hate that. Most game fish hate the idea of a potential prey food source getting away from them. So when I was burning that bait back to the boat, it was triggering that reactionary instincts in the fish and they were coming after it. Versus when I was working that jerk bait in a more traditional manner with a jerk pause motion, they didn't show any interest. They were coming up, maybe they were looking at it. I didn't have forward facing at the time, so I can't tell you specifically, but I can tell you even if they were coming up and looking at it, they were not eating the bait. And that was because they were getting a good look at it and they were not interested in it. And it wasn't like this object was getting away from them. So since that, which was years ago, I've really tried to impart this speed action into a lot of baits. And I find that it works for all species of bass and it works everywhere. This is something that works extremely well. So if you pick up any bait, you tell me whatever bait it is, and I can tell you how to add speed to it. So a lot of you probably are like, well, what about a drop shot? You're going to add speed to a drop shot? Yeah, I can add speed to a drop shot, and I'll tell you how. If it's a crankbait, absolutely you can add speed to it. It really doesn't matter what technique it is. And there's really 4 ways to impart more speed. The first is the most obvious, and that's simply to turn your reel handle faster, right? Burn the reel handle as fast as you can. The problem with this is a lot of times it's still not quite fast enough. So obviously you just reel faster. But you can't do that necessarily with, say, a football jig or a drop shot because that kind of takes away from the bait itself. So if you've got an actual bait that is coming through the water column, a moving bait per se, a spinner bait, a vibrating jig, a crankbait, those types of baits, yes, you can just reel them faster. A second way to impart more speed, and it's easier than reeling faster, is to get a reel that has a high speed gear ratio on it. So something that picks up a lot more line per reel turn will actually help you move your bait faster than just simply picking up a reel and turning the handle as fast as it can. So that's the second best way. And again, that really works well for your moving baits. But if you're talking about baits that aren't necessarily a moving bait, so maybe it's a football jig, maybe it's a drop shot, a Ned rig, that's when you actually need to impart that speed on the fall of the bait. So say it's a Ned rig, generally speaking, if I'm fishing a Ned rig, I like to fish a tenth of an ounce or lighter. That's generally what I start with. But if I'm not getting bit on that slow fall, I go the opposite end of the spectrum. I go really heavy, like a 3/8 ounce or even up to a half ounce Ned rig, because I want that bait to fall as fast as possible. Now, that's only the initial fall. But what I will tell you is one of the best ways when the speed really is coming into play is to impart that same motion throughout the retrieve. So, how do you do that? You start ripping the rod tip almost to the point where you're setting the hook, a stroke motion to get that bait to come up off the bottom and fall right back down. It's one of the best ways to trigger strikes with a jig if you're fishing deep ledges, with a Ned rig, all of your bottom slow moving baits. You can pop high off the bottom to get fall back down. That's where your weight comes in. So not only can you pick up speed of your bait by using a heavier bait, the last way to go about this is to use a longer rod. So if you're out on a ledge and you're stroking a jig out there, one of the best ways to get more speed to more explosion off of the bottom is to use a longer rod. So now not only are you using a heavier weight in your jig to create a fast fall, your longer rod will actually create more a more faster movement or explosion off of the bottom, which triggers those reaction strikes. So those are four ways you can increase the speed of your bait. It's not simply just turn your reel handle faster. There's some other things you can do to improve it. Because honestly, I don't care how fast you can reel, how high of a gear ratio reel you have, you will never be able to out reel a fish. You may pull your bait out of the strike zone, but that fish, if they want it, they can catch up to your bait no matter how fast you think you can reel it. Now, I will tell you, there is a couple other keys with this whole thing. Now, obviously, like I just said, if you pull your bait out of the strike zone, you're probably not going to get the fish to commit to it as well as keeping your bait in the strike zone. So the three things that I like to do with these retrieves is impart some pausing motion in it. So if I'm fishing just a big flat, I'm going to pause my bait once or twice during that retrieve and always before I pick the bait up out of the water to make another cast. You'd be amazed at how many times a fish will come flying out of nowhere and hit a pause bait before you pick it up to make that cast. If you pick your bait up to make a cast, you're never going to have that fish to come and hit it. So the first thing is, if I'm fishing big flats, I'm always going to impart a couple of pauses, random pauses. There's no key area to do it. You just do it a couple of times on the retrieve. If I'm fishing around areas that have very specific strike zones, maybe I'm burning a bait past the dock, maybe I'm burning the bait past a piece of standing timber, I'm always going to impart a pause right at the moment that that bait comes past that object. So if I'm bringing it past the dock, I'm going to pause it right at the end of the dock. If I'm bringing it past a lay down tree or a sailboat mooring buoy, I'm going to bring it past. I'm going to pause it right on the side between that's closest to the boat at that point. As soon as I pass the object, I'm going to stop it. So that's another key time to do it. The last time I'm going to do it is if you're bringing your bait past a depth change. So maybe you made a long cast up onto a flat, you're retrieving it back across a 4-foot flat, and then that flat drops from 4 to 8 feet. I'm going to put a pause in that bait right at that drop change. That's one of the key strike zone areas as well. So if you pick up the speed of your baits during the warm water period and impart a handful of pauses, I'm assuring you guys, you will get a bunch of strikes. And this is also a really good way at generating a really big bite. A lot of times the biggest fish in the lakes have to be tricked into biting your bait. And one of the best ways to do that is to take advantage of their reactionary movements. And you just got to create those bites where they don't necessarily want to eat, but they can't help themselves. So give it a try. All summer long, the next several months, this is one of the best ways to generate strikes. Pick up the speed of your bait and you'll catch more fish. Thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate all of the support that I get from you. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Stay tuned. New video coming out tomorrow.